This is Akahi News. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's intervention in the freezing of Osun State Government account by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC) raises a very important question. And what is that question? If the president says he does not interfere in the operational activities of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC), why did he intervene when the EFCC obtained court order to freeze an Osun State Government account? Let us be fair and examine both sides critically. President Bola Tinubu says he has consistently maintained that anti-corruption and law enforcement agencies must operate independently, professionally, and without political interference. He also says he has deliberately refrained from directing or interfering in the operational activities of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission (EFCC). But then comes the contradiction. The president admitted that he had not yet been fully appraised, take note of that point and pay attention, of the fact behind the EFCC's action. Yet, despite not having the full facts, he concluded that the timing was inauspicious and said he was therefore compelled to intervene. This raises a serious question. And what is that question? If you have not yet received the full facts, why intervene before allowing the institution and the courts to complete the process? Now, EFCC also has a legitimate argument. According to the commission, it noticed suspicious financial transactions and followed the legal process. It approached the court, presented its case, and obtained an order before the account was frozen. If that account contains transactions that investigators genuinely consider suspicious, should the EFCC ignore them simply because an election is approaching in Osun State? Absolutely not. An anti-corruption agency cannot be expected to say, we have discovered suspicious transactions, but because the timing is politically sensitive, we will wait. No. That would also undermine institutional independence. And this is where the matter becomes complicated. The president says institutions should have clearly defined powers and should be able to act without prior presidential approval. EFCC apparently did exactly that. It did not ask the president before approaching the court. It followed its process. A court granted the order. So, if institutions do not need presidential permission to act, should the president subsequently intervene simply because he considers the timing politically inappropriate? That is the heart of the controversy. Now, was President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's intervention politically illegal? Take note of that question. Not necessarily. There is an important distinction between presidential oversight and improper interference. If the president directed EFCC to return to court and properly seek the vacation of the order, the court remains involved. But if the president's intervention effectively tells an anti-corruption agency to stop an investigation because its timing is politically inconvenient, then that raises much more serious questions about operational independence. And the president himself used the word intervened. Take note of that. So the question is not really whether there was intervention. There was, of course, absolutely there is. The question is whether that intervention was justified. There is also a legitimate concern about the timing of the EFCC action. Osun is heading towards a governorship election comes August 15, and any major federal action against a state government should during such a sensitive period can easily create the impression of political interference. That is true, but there is a difference between looking politically suspicious and being politically motivated. The timing alone does not prove that EFCC acted politically. At the same time, EFCC should be prepared to answer important questions. Why did the investigation begin? What exactly triggered the investigation? Why was the freezing order necessary at this particular time? And what evidence was presented to the court? Transparency would help Nigerians distinguish facts from political speculations. But there is an even bigger issue here. And what is that issue? Institutional independence is not tested when an agency does what the government likes. It is tested when an agency does something the government dislikes. If EFCC is genuinely independent, it must sometimes be allowed to take actions that are politically uncomfortable. And if the government believes EFCC acted wrongly, there are lawful mechanisms for challenging that action. The courts should decide whether the freezing order was justified. EFCC should defend its investigation. The affected government should have the opportunity to challenge the order, and the president should be careful not to become the person who determines which anti-corruption investigations proceed and which ones stop. So, what is Akahi News' verdict based on this report? President Tinubu is right that the timing of the EFCC action can create serious political suspicion. EFCC is also right that an anti-corruption agency cannot suspend its statutory responsibility merely because an election is approaching. But President Tinubu's intervention creates a credibility problem because it appears difficult to reconcile with his own declaration that he does not interfere with the operational activities of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, especially when he acknowledged that he had not yet been fully appraised of the facts. Nigeria does not need institutions that are independent only when their decisions are convenient. We need institutions that remain independent when their actions are politically uncomfortable. Because today it is Osun State, tomorrow it could be another state. And ultimately, the real question is not whether President Tinubu supports or opposes Governor Adeleke. The real question is, can Nigerian institutions do their jobs independently even when their decisions are inconvenience to those in power? That is the question. That is the true test of democracy. Thank you for joining me on this segment. I am Joseph Iyaji, and this platform is Akahi News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.